Hello and welcome back. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, in whatever part of the world you are in. We are on the final session of the event. And for this one, which is a roundtable discussion, we have been joined by esteemed experts from some certainly large companies, but also consulting background as well. Now, before we jump into the introduction of each one of the panel members, let me sort of refresh you on the topic. The topic is augmenting digital in the age of operational excellence. So with that, I would like to introduce you to Carlos De Castro from ABB, Laura Nuhan from Microsoft, and Georgina Turton from GFT Consulting. And I would ask each one of them to introduce themselves. Maybe we start with Georgina. Please tell us, what does GFT stands for?
Well, actually, GFT is just my initials, nice and handy, so I can remember it easily, because I like to keep things as simple as possible. So really nice to be here. As Anirvan said, I have had experience from a mix of consultancy background and what I call having a real job as well over the last 20 years, where I've had experience with automation, digital, RPA, AI from a number of different perspectives. So really interesting to come and have a chat about it, because what I will say up front is I've probably spent more time stopping automation projects than I have completing them.
That's definitely going to be very, very interesting discussion and debate, because one of the people who actually facilitates or one of the companies that actually facilitate automation through collaborative software companies is our next presenter from Laura.
Yeah, so we like to see automation and innovation going, but anyways, my background is a bit like Georgina in consulting, had my own startup in Silicon Valley where I worked for 10 years and then moved to the big company as Microsoft. So it's a jack of all trades, different experience now with Microsoft, working with industry sales teams in the industry of health and public sector, which public sector is not a fast mover, but you see, because of everything that's happened in the pandemic, that digital is the new game. What else can I say? I also believe it's not only about the technology, but about the people, the human part, the culture, and as well the business outcomes. With the business background, I always will look at like what's the value that it will bring, and then technology as the enabler. But more
excellent. Absolutely. And at the moment you said public sector, I saw somebody raise his eyebrows. It wasn't me. There's only one other person who ends up working, I'm assuming, a lot with the public sector. So, Carlos, it's time for your introduction.
Yeah, sure. Hi, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I work for ABB, so I'm the head of quality and continuous improvement in one of the business units of ABB, which is called ABB Electrification. And I could say ABB is pretty much known brand for everybody. So we are in robotics, we are in process automation, we are in the technology company. Our business in particular is very much connected to electrical products and systems, from the generation, distribution, all the way to electrical vehicles. And I would say, as a quality and continuous improvement practitioner, I look at automation probably more from the user perspective, right? So, of course, ABB also sells automation to our customers, but as part of operations, we use it, and I think. Especially after the pandemics, it became a very hot topic that I'm sure we are going to be exploring now. My pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, we also had somebody else who was part of the panel, but she's marooned in one of the islands, stuck with a very sketchy Wi-Fi. Juliet from Marriott, she won't be. Oh, sorry, Julia, who won't be able to join us today. You know, whether it was the island itself or whether it was a genuine problem with the Wi-Fi, we'll probably leave it out to the jury to decide. But Welcome to the session. The topic is actually quite interesting and very close to the latest thinking that's in the market, right? As most of us know, operational excellence has been in vogue for many years, and obviously, going back to the Henry Ford's assembly line, followed by Stewart's statistical process control, through the 60s and the 70s about business process reengineering, and then the Toyota again starting similar, and then 80s and 90s about the Six Sigma startup journey, not startup journey, Six Sigma journey start, and the kind of metamorphosis of the Toyota production system into lean, and then sort of confluence of all of those. But what we haven't really seen is a lot of movement in this operational excellence space, except for maybe Agile and Scrum, which has been talked more about. But what has, however, happened around us is the world has become a lot more digital, a lot more data-centric, a lot more experience-centric. And what we believe is that organizations, especially the ones that have an operational excellence or a continuous improvement cell, are not necessarily either acknowledging, or if they are acknowledging, not being able to comprehend what does it mean, how do we embrace, how do we adopt all of these things into the modern day thinking, the modern day operational excellence. So Laura, I would start with you. What's your perspective on the topic on augmenting digital in operational excellence?
Wow, do we have an hour? And I like that we have different people here with different perspectives, right? And I will say it's all about taking an holistic view and think big, start small. And it sounds very easy, but it's less easy than this because we have people that like to execute. We're going to do this and this, no changes. So the agile that you were mentioning is very important, but not only from the technology you expect, like the sprints, but also at the business, at executive level, at management teams, thinking different in a different pace. And then the integration, having different perspectives, working together to make it happen. Otherwise, we talk about automation, but automation is maybe one is part that you take processes and you will automate them. But for me then, it's my personal favor, where the real magic happens is where there's innovation, where you can accelerate. And for this, you need a diverse team. So there's a lot in augmenting digital in operation means a lot of different ways of working, different ways of reporting. So you need to make sure that you have that clear. And just to summarize then, include the C-level, which has to have a different way of thinking, not the waterfall approach, but the agile approach. The capabilities, because digital requires a different mindset, but especially as well tech capabilities. Do you want them in-house or not? What do you need? You don't know at the beginning. An operational model, and bringing business and IT together. I too often see, and maybe that's what Georgina was mentioning, that it goes one way where business maybe goes the other way. Or we are taking siloed approach. We're going to do one thing because one of the main, I'm sorry to say so much, but one of the things that is the biggest challenge is the complexity. There is so much. How can we ever make choices, and how do we change what we're going to do next? So this needs a different operation model and governance. I hope that answers a bit of the question. Oh, you're mute.
Irvin. Oh, no.
Thank you. It's just a start. So we will come back to a lot more discussion. Georgina, since she mentioned about automation, you couldn't be too far off from the word automation. What's your perspective on the digital augmentation?
Well, so where I see the biggest problem here is that a lot of organizations, I don't think, have really understood what they were going into, and they've gone in with the wrong mindset. So to Laura's point, they really should have been thinking big and then gone small. And a lot of organizations I've found over the last 5 to 7 years have gone in thinking that some form of automation was their silver bullet for cost savings. And they've gone in with that cost saving drive. And the measure of success has been all around the reduction in FTE, so the reduction in headcount. and it's been done on a cost basis. And I think that's why in my eyes, I've seen more failures than I have successes. And it's been very challenging when I've been brought into an organization to help them make it successful. So I worked with one bank, which was in about, it must have been about 2012, 2013, was starting the whole RPA journey, very new days. And the cost was already up to about 1.2 million. And I had to come in and say to them, stop. Your operational activity costs less than that a year, and you've already spent more on trying to implement something than the cost of running it in the first place. And it was because they hadn't understood the basis, and that to augment digital experiences, operational excellence, it's really got to be about having your foundations right. It's got to be about understanding. It brings quality control or financial control. It can bring employee satisfaction because suddenly they don't have to do those menial tasks that they find frustrating, transporting data from A to B and things. It gives them the time to do the value add. And that message has been missing. So challenging organizations and stopping it because they started with the wrong mindset and didn't understand that they couldn't automate what they were doing because they hadn't done continuous improvement or any operational excellence first is a real challenge. But to me, there's a lot to offer, but I still think it's early days. So I still will stand by that I've seen more failures than I have success.
Very good. And we'll talk about the failures versus success and the role of digital. But before we do that, it would be unfair to give some airtime to Carlos and talk about some of the big company thinking, because I'm sure, in larger companies, and you've been associated with several large companies, that it takes time for things to move. It takes time for the elephants to rise. So, Carlos, let's get your perspective on digital augmentation in the operation.
Yeah, thanks, Anirvan. I think a former professor of mine years ago used to say that organizations are like automobiles. They don't run by themselves except downhill. And there comes the element of people in it, right? So organizations are formed by people. And I connect very much to the point of Georgina. If you try to manage a transformation process, now we talk about digital transformation, but we all know that there were different transformations in the past that we all have been gone through. If you talk about organizational transformation and you leave the element people, the human element, the human dynamics behind, it is for sure a recipe for failure. I see that there is normally a mix. So it's clear that connectivity drives engagement. So when you get people connected, when you get customers and suppliers connected, when you have the supply chain connected, you are driving efficiency, you are driving engagement. Now, many people will mix connectivity with the tools that you need in order to obtain the connectivity, and they jump very quickly to select tools. Nowadays, we know there are plenty of suppliers of tools calling us every day trying to offer something, and it's very tempting to jump quickly on that. The same way as we are tempted to jump in technology for our private lives. But then to take certain distance, understand, okay, what is really the challenge that we are trying to address here, and then designing a system that integrates the technology, the tools, and the people, aiming the solution of a problem or a challenge that an organization have. It takes an extra effort that not everybody is prepared to do or ready to do sometimes.
Very nicely said. In fact, I was just reflecting on the things that all three of you said, and I'm assuming that, Laura, you're not one of the ones that calls Carlos with some of the collaboration tools that may be there, but who knows? So on reflection, here's what I find. One is process improvement or continuous improvement. People look at it as how can I make things faster, better, cheaper, and more efficient. Compared to some of the digital piece that is being brought about is a fundamental shift in thinking, a mindset. That's Georgina, to your point. If you look at some of the challengers, they have taken the fundamental thinking, or let's not the fundamental, but the traditional thinking, and they've turned it on its head and come up with new business models, new operating models. Do you think that it is a constraint of thinking that is stopping people or organizations to leverage what's there as or what flexibility digital can offer, versus it's the power of digital, which is not really power, but more so, which is being promoted by consultants and by companies as a marketing gimmick? So let's hear, maybe Laura, we start with you on that part of what you think is the reality, lifting the lid here.
Yeah, and I think the reality is for every company different, right? Where you are, what the culture is. But I think the reflection on where you are and the art of the possible, which I really like as a sentence, that's key. And then you can identify what the road is to get there, which is more than the solutions. And of course, there are also, as Carlos was saying about the tools, I personally, and I'm not making any commercials here, but apps that employees can use or build themselves easily to try things out, so to make it more accessible for people. What is this digital will lead to more creativity as well. So it's enabling, empowering, and stimulating. And I think every person has a great imagination, thoughts, but it's creating the right circumstances, and also to feel safe, to think maybe different. And back to my other favorite topic is diversity and inclusion, because it's needed. It's needed from the human part, but also from a digital part. So if you can create a safe environment where new ideas are welcomed, and and this is the hard part, right? It goes back to change management. How do I foster change? And maybe it's not even change management, it's managing change, because our world is changing very fast. Every day there's a new possibility. So my key thing would be, think about, again, the North Star, the art of the possible, the crazy ideas, make it then practical. What is it? And also, what do we need to get there? And manage change and help managers and people and teams to do, to embrace the new way of working that you identified for your company. But I think there's not one secret sauce. There are elements.
Yep, absolutely agree. And I like that everybody has imagination. So some people imagine how to stop automation projects. Some people think about how to sort of bring in collaboration tools or not to bring in collaboration tools. But let's ask Georgina, what's usually the psyche behind the mindset of the leadership when it comes to sort of making a decision? Because I'm sure when they may have started out, they must have visualized, and as you rightly pointed out, many of these things get caught in financial modeling. It's more of Excel or Lotus 123 back then modeling versus the real benefit. I mean, I've seen so many brilliant business cases with the right financial numbers, lots of good assumptions and reasoning, and yet when it came to the actual content, the actual technology implementation or digital implementation, it fell short. Not because of the technology necessarily, but something was happening with people and leadership. So, Georgina, your turn.
Yeah, so I think to the original question when you were posing it to us, I personally think part of the places where I've seen it not working has been down to consultancy companies selling a dream, selling an idea, a concept that was, in an ideal world, it was the art of the possible, but out of reach of that organization. And they've gone in a number of times. I've worked alongside a large consultancy company where they've said, look, we want to come in and do a pilot, a proof of concept. We'll put an RPA in. And 6 months later, they're still trying to put an RPA in. And like, you know what? This should have been a 4-week project to do it. And so you obviously haven't done your due diligence and realized this process is not ripe for RPA, that something else needed to be done. And I think there has been a little bit too much of that selling the dream. And unfortunately, at a very senior level, people have heard this and picked up on it, and they've seen other big organizations that have run with it and gone, we want that. But to Laura's point, every organization is different, and every organization is in a different place operationally. And I think it is about getting that creativity together. But for an organization to have that, they have to feel that they're in a pretty strong financial position with enough space to be able to do that, because it does cost a little bit of money, and that money, or a little bit of investment, because it could be through people's time, it could be through playing with things, but it's about giving the staff the empowerment to do it. And I really think, okay, I don't want to be a salesperson for Microsoft here, but and they're not paying me anything to say this, but I do think the apps that Microsoft have there, giving the staff the allowance to play and develop it can really help them, rather than that reliance on a big consultancy company coming in and promising to automate the end-to-end process. So I think in a way, it is a lack of imagination at the senior level, because they've seen this great story that's told. They can see that X company is saying that they have 10,000 bots in place. Well, the cost of 10,000 bots is more than the whole cost of the entire back office operation for the organization. So why would you want to go down that route? So there is no one place. And I think, unfortunately, I do think a lot of it is a mis-selling. And I think it should be about small empowerment, playing, giving people the space to be innovative. Because on the other side of things, it's about having that joined up approach. If you're going to be innovative, link in with other people. So don't be just an operational person coming up with ideas. Find someone in IT who can help you if you're not great on it. Work with them. Get them, both of you, developing those skills.
That's an excellent segue. Thank you, Georgina, for my next question to Carlos. As we know that large organizations have dedicated innovation teams, R&D, etc. I'm pretty certain that even in the organizations that you've been linked with, whether it's your current organization or the prior organizations, that they were dabbling with digital elements or digital parts, whether it was virtual reality or augmented reality or artificial intelligence or even advanced analytics. It's happening there. And yet, it does not see the light of the mainstream. To Georgina's point, that we may introduce RPA or bots in customer service or in support functions, but where it should be used like a true innovation or a true sort of augmentation of intelligence, it is not necessarily looked upon that, and there is always this forcing by the consultants and also by the glitter of the market. So how do you guys, or what's your opinion? I mean, the way organizations deal with R&D innovation on one side and the rest of the organization on the other side with respect to digital augmentation?
I would say that you see indeed a concentration of such digital projects. Let's take the digital transformation as an example. You see a concentration of those projects and initiatives in customer-facing areas. So it is true. Myself, as a member of organization, of course, I'm extremely happy that my company is investing on strong digital customer-facing applications in order to simplify the way customers do business with us. And ABB is pretty strong on that. But it is true that there is certain internal inertia when it comes to bringing those innovation or even the lessons learned out of those customer-facing projects into internal operational excellence, improving efficiency, productivity, etc. I think again, Anirvan, is most probably connected to people's mindset. If you are running a factory, as I did in the past, you are so busy and so occupied in achieving your own particular specific targets of your department or your factory or your site or your location, it is like this old picture, right? So we are too busy to start innovating because we have a business to run. And so there is somehow a certain disconnection in terms of the clock speed. And I believe this drives large organizations to put more emphasis and get more speed on customer-facing automation and digitization, and a bit less on internal efficiency improvement. Now, I think this is also changing, because as you start to look at the value chain end to end, very quickly you realize that it's impossible to just improve the customer-facing element and not have the backing up operations improved at the same speed, because you generate expectations towards the market. You open the doors of your organization for customers to come quickly, but then you don't have the back infrastructure in order to provide, to deliver on time, to deliver the right product in the right quantities, etc. So I see this also changing, and this type of conversations as we have today are excellent, because I see more and more professionals from operational excellence, lean manufacturing, continuous improvement, you name it, also getting onboarded into the digital movement.
Absolutely, and I think this is so true that there are changes that are taking place, which are across the board, which is absolutely a very, very good sign. The question, however, I have, and again, because I always ask these controversial questions or questions that arouse a bit of discussion and debate. So if we look at back in the 20th century, early 20th century, when Henry Ford and his company introduced assembly line, right, it made jobs faster. Cars could be produced much faster than they could be produced ever before, right? Because it was from individual craftsmen to assembly line, right? Then we fast forward and we talk about the large mainframes, the IBMs of this world. ES 9000, if I remember correctly, was one of the big boys there. It could do the same repeatable job faster, 5x, 10x faster. Tesla, on the other side, is a new way that something is run. iPhone, on the other side, is something completely redefined the way it's run. We are at an inflection point where digital is supposed to be, or at least digital can be, that reinventing point for organizations, versus is digital still a 20th century thinking of making things faster, better, and cheaper? Georgina, I see you.
Oh, I'm chomping at the bit on this one. So, look, I think for most organizations, they still have that 20th century mindset that it's about doing things faster rather than it about being a better experience. And I think of one client I had, which was in the public sector. And they are the department that focused on rural support for farmers and people that were land management. And they looked at doing a digital experience, putting things in, but again, so driven by cost that it was all about how could they do this as cheaply as possible without looking at the end consumer who needed to use that digital experience. And the end consumer were farmers, people that lived on the land, people that lived in rural settings, which for us in the UK have very poor internet provision. So they were never going to be able to interact. They still needed the ability to have paper. Now, I pick on them, but I don't think that they are alone. I think a lot of organizations are still thinking it as a cost-saving initiative or thinking about doing things faster rather than the experience it can bring. And I think that's because they don't bring employees together with the customer of the process, whether it's internal customer or external customer, to work out how should this look and feel so that we have that balance along the journey. So I still think for a lot of organizations, they're stuck in the 20th century about doing it, something to do it faster, rather than thinking about doing it better and improving the quality.
Right. So, Carlos, let me ask you this question, kind of extending. Electricity is still probably from Benjamin Franklin's time, hasn't changed much. Is there a need for companies who are in the old economy businesses to adopt digital?
Well, it's a little bit older than that, even probably. Absolutely. I think there is no more debate. Organizations are driven by the market, connecting to the statement I've made before. So if I take clearly the example of ABB, but also other organizations I have been before, we are driven by the market. So if the world is changing, that means our markets are changing. The same way organizations are made by people. Our customers, they might represent B2B industry, but they are people at the end. So the world is changing, the expectations of the market change. Customers want it faster, want it easier. Many of our customers now are also working from home, so they are not in their offices anymore, and they need to continue to be served. So I think this drives somehow the entire movement in the value chain for going into the digital experiences. The same way, I have to say, we are also pushing our suppliers in the same direction. If we have no conditions to create an entire value that is efficient, if our supplier base is not also going into the same direction. I think transparency in the supply chain, for example, is a key topic that has been discussed by everybody. In terms of the global crisis that we have faced and are still facing the consequences of it during the COVID times, how an organization like ABB with millions of customers around the world could continue to operate, having most of the management leadership at home and factories running automatedly from distance without a digital support, without the digital tools, we would not be able to run it. So, yes, indeed, no matter which type of industry we are, no matter in which type of technology you are, I think this is an irreversible path.
Excellent. I think nicely sort of exemplified by what you shared. Laura, you are on the supplier side of the tools, the technologies, and absolutely, Microsoft now has reinvented themselves again under the new leadership, and they are looking at various things and playing a big part of the role with cloud computing, Azure, and also some of the other pieces with artificial intelligence. When you go and speak with organizations, so it's not just a technology play, but just as Carlos mentioned, people, or Georgina mentioned leadership. What is it that you guys, not necessarily you, but I'm just saying in the industry, what is it that you feel is required more, because if the leaders don't know the power of artificial intelligence, then they probably will never think about artificial intelligence. For them, it's going to be a chatbot that could potentially replace one of our finance analysts.
Yeah, and I think this is back to when we started this conversation about thinking holistic, thinking big, and as well getting people on board. Because also often from our perspective, we talk to the CIO, but we need to talk to everyone from all different levels, but also to the chief HR, like getting people used to digital, adopting digital. But also we need to realize that the level of comfort with new technology, artificial intelligence, cloud, and so on is still, I think we are still at the start. So we need to take the pace of the customer and bring them with us of the art of what's possible with AI, but also the ethical part of AI, for instance. So there's a lot of different things we need to think of and discuss. And I was just, when I was listening to Carlos and Georgina about the chatbot, right? My background is as well from marketing and sales. And if I look at telcos, they introduce, as an example, they come with chatbots, but it's basically only to bring down cost. So now instead of talking to someone, I get stupid answers and so on. So it will bring down my customer experience. So this is one thing. So really think about customer first. But then the other example why I like it is that customer experience has a lot of different key factors. And with data, you could identify it. Take again the telcos that we all know, the billing. It's not what I was expected, or it gets too late and so on. The network. If we don't have connectivity, we get crazy. So where are the hotspots? Where can you improve it? It will directly help with customer experience. The field service, how they treat you, the voice. So everyone has a role to play in customer experience. And the beauty with data and getting insights is that you can start where it matters most. And this example is now for telco, but we can bring it for many others. So again, this integrated, holistic thinking and adapting to where your customer is, where the C-level is at, and make it just easy, right? It's not complicated. We are trying sometimes it's so difficult, but artificial intelligence is helping to improve processes, to identify needs earlier, even before we know, or making tasks easier, taking away cumbersome tasks, and I can spend more time with my customer, or then I will stop. But what I also like is an example in health, where you can use artificial intelligence for diagnostics for brain tumors. And then instead of a job that took the doctor 6 hours to identify exactly where the contours of the tumors are, it takes 3 minutes, and I can spend much more time with my patients as if I'm a doctor, which is what I better like than looking at images. So there's plenty of examples there.
Absolutely, and thanks for sharing that. Let me kind of take us back to the world of chatbots, right? And this question is going to come towards Georgina. So in the world of chatbots, and Laura, the way you explained it is that people look at cutting down costs and they introduce chatbots, right? I fundamentally see with chatbots there are three problems. First one is, to Carlos's point, we should be talking more or connecting more with the customers. Chatbot just reduced that by 10% or 10x. It's introducing an in-between. The reason for that is the second point, which is chatbots are not that intelligent necessarily. It is frequently asked questions where you kind of wrap it up in some form of technology and put it out, right? So that's the second part. And the third part is the cost itself, so given all of this, are organizations missing the big picture in order, and are they getting bedazzled by the glitter and the glitz of the technology versus the real benefit it brings to the organization?
I think absolutely. They are getting sort of sucked into and romanced by the glitz of what they see. But it is also this lack of understanding at a senior level of what is possible in the art of the possible. Now, I do actually think chatbots have a place. Personally, I think they're probably better used internally, because where you have a lot of internal processes where you have to call up a function because something hasn't worked right on your HR, or you don't know how to report someone's late, or you don't know where to go for your expenses, rather than trolling through your process notes, it would be quite handy to have a chatbot to address that. So I think chatbots do have a potential place in operations if they're done right, but I think they're overused, completely overused at the customer-facing side of things, because everyone is saying it should be about engaging with your customer, and it should be about using automation so you can engage cleverer with your customer and capture that information and service them better. Because nobody sort of starts off going, you know what, today I want to talk to a robot. they're calling up about something. They want to talk to a human being. They want to be able to explain things, or they want to be able to get through smoothly. So if I've got a question, and I constantly get frustrated when I ask my question on a chat box and they go, I'm afraid I cannot help you. Is there anything else I can help you with today? And I just go, no. So whilst I think there is a place, I think we can't be too damning about chatbots. I do think they're overused, but I think absolutely in terms of at a senior level, people don't understand the art of the possible. And I think that's where they've got to work more cleverly with innovative teams, with developing that innovative culture across the board, and also working with the suppliers to understand what can be done and setting that wider vision, because I don't think any of us are in a single position to be able to know everything that's going on.
100%. And in fact, the way you describe chatbot and its importance, it is a tool. It is something used in the right places, can yield a lot of good results. Unfortunately, most of the people do not use it, and which is why it's so much easier to describe or to sort of narrate a story with where the faulty guy is a chatbot. Couple of questions at this stage. First of all, whenever we see these technologies, or actually, let me take a step back. Historically, what we have seen is religion, when it was promoted by kings or by royalty, that's when religious prospered, right? It's the Byzantine time, because of the Christianity spread. It was because of the kingdoms in the Middle East that Islam spread. So we've seen the existence of religion helping, or religion being helped by the royalty, the governments, or whatever used to be there. Then we move to sort of the Renaissance period, or even before the Renaissance period, which is art and culture, again patronage by the royal family. 20th century was more about businesses. Things that were promoted by big businesses prospered. Things that were not promoted by big businesses suffered. And big businesses usually would have CEOs, whether it was Henry Ford or Toyota, or even Jack Welch for that matter. These people helped promote causes. Much of Operation Excellence is hinged on what these people did. Do we see something similar happening where digital is being promoted by people at that level?
I am not so sure.
That's definitely not a chatbot that's answering. So
could be true in certain industries. What I mean is I'm not sure there is a correlation, because if I look at the banking industry, for instance, and I have experiences with banks in two different countries. I mean, I was privileged enough to live in more than one country, so I have remaining bank account from different country, which sometimes is good, sometimes is a nightmare. But I have been interacting with banks, and the more you interact with the large banks, the more you see how hard is the communication, how cumbersome is the experience. And how this particular type of industry is struggling in the present moment. And then, I just have a chance to go there, read a couple of financial blogs, and I learn about this fantastic new fintech that I go here with my mobile phone. I open the bank account. It takes me a few minutes. I make a selfie of myself. I photograph my passport. I send everything. I mean, I don't know who is behind that. I can Google them. Maybe I can find their LinkedIn profile. But I get an excellent digital experience. I had excellent service with an extremely lower fee compared to the large banks, because they don't have the infrastructure. So in this case, I would say, is digital innovation being driven by the leadership of the large banking industry, or is rather being driven by the small fintechs that are popping up and really disrupting completely this type of industry?
Definitely. Yeah. I'm just going to jump in. I would agree completely, because a lot of my clients are banks and investment, so retail banks and investment banks. And oh my gosh, I'm astounded by the number of people in the bank that don't even know how to use Excel. So I spend more time doing Excel lessons than I do actually reviewing their processes, because that's step one for them. And I think it is the smaller startups that are, or the companies that have an innovative mindset. That's what's driving digital, I think.
Yeah, and I would say exactly to Georgina, your last remark, where the big companies that have this mindset, that are really convinced how they want to change. And I've been in one, Microsoft, as you were mentioning in the beginning, with the new leadership, really turning around from the Excels to where we are now, this player in cloud. But it definitely needed a different way of working and a lot of focus. But back, what I see, because there are, of course, at the startups, a lot of things happen there, and then you see this normal curve where others pick up, right? Also in banking, the first apps were not coming from maybe the big ones, but the innovative large companies are really committing to cloud, to data, to innovation, and as well working more and more together with startups. Because I always said, if you want to see how you have to improve your product or service, look at the startups in your environment, because they will nail down exactly what's wrong. Uber is an example, and we have Netflix and all these others. But so you can arrange for it, but it needs a different way of organizing. As you said, like, people are still getting up to speed with Excel, you have a problem. But otherwise, you can make it work and have hybrid models.
Yeah, absolutely. And this time I would also ask or encourage people in the audience if they have any comments or questions to put in. Georgina, is it possible that the person was using a Mac instead of a Windows platform, so had something similar like Sheets instead of Excel? Anyways, coming back to the point. So we know that the organizations are being challenged by some of these startups and scale-ups, right? What are, if you were to sit at a chair where a CEO is sitting in front of you, right, and saying, hey, the world is changing around me. The world is becoming more digital, and I'm going to be constantly being challenged by these startups, and let's assume that this is somebody from a conventional company or an old economy company. What are the few things that you're going to tell them about a good thing about the company, that they need to go, why they need to go to digital, versus what would be the consequence if they actually do not end up going the digital journey? Georgina, because you're the consultant here, we'll start with you.
Oh, thanks. All right. So with my answer, I would say it depends. And the thing I would say to the CEO is, how well do you understand your customer? And that's got to be the starting point, how well they understand that customer. Because if they have a customer that tends to engage in a certain way, then it's about understanding, is that right? Can we do it better? How can we tap into that and use digital to help support that? And then my next question is, how well do you know your employees? Are you giving them the right basis to deliver that excellent customer service that is required? Because a lot of the times as well, I'll see a fantastic digital experience going in place where for the end consumer, they've got this fantastic seamless approach to engaging with the company. They can do it all online through the cloud. It takes seconds. But in the background, you've got 1980s systems with a GUI interface that are taking 7 minutes to load up, and the customer and the employees are having to look at 6 different screens to find the data to then fulfill it, to make sure that there's a seamless approach in the front going on there. So I would say to the CEO, how well do you know your customers? And then how well do you know your employees? And then linking the two as well, depending on what industry you're in, is understanding your supply base. And to Carlos's point earlier, it's about that B2B basis as well, because that ultimately will give that seamless flow. And once they understand that, then I think they can start really being innovative and encouraging people to come up with ideas of what they've seen out there, what is the art of the possible for those side of things.
Thank you so much, Georgina, and thanks for also elaborating and articulating it well, because that gives me a hook to ask a question to both Carlos and Laura, right? So Georgina mentioned about customer and employees, and it's almost suppliers are almost left out of the equation, right? And yet, when it comes to digital augmentation is very different from using digital to improve upon my processes, right? And this is where a lot more collaboration is required at a supplier level. So getting a true digital augmentation would be a collaboration between you and your supplier, right? Let's hear your viewpoints on that.
Carlos, you want to go first, or?
Yeah, I can go first. It is all about partnership and collaboration at the end. And you asked before which kind of recommendation we would give, and I connecting the 2 points. I would say for an organization to be successful in the market, you need to look at the entire value chain, before what is coming before you, what is coming after you. And I think more and more organizations start to realize that, for example, not everything we produce we need to sell. Not everything we sell we need to produce ourselves, right? So this is connected directly to the collaboration. So how to engage suppliers, building the necessary trust, building the necessary transparency. And without the trust and without the transparency, collaboration is very difficult. And that's the moment where digital augmentation helps. I mean, if I'm sitting here and I have full transparency to, for example, the stocks of my key strategic supplier in the Far East, I can make decisions. If the key supplier there trusts me, they will open their books also for me to have the visualization. And it's only with this level of trust that the collaboration can work. And always, again, trying to not put the tools in front of the problem, as Georgina was mentioning at the beginning, because I can be easily I can be amazed and mesmerized by a fantastic presentation of a full integrated supply chain digital, but maybe that's not what I need, or maybe it is. But if I don't know what I need first, it's very hard to make the right decision on that.
I like that. No, I remember one of big customers that had a lot of data about customers, and then I asked, "But what do you know about your customer?" And the answer was only 5%. And this is what's happening. We are getting in love with all the data, but if you don't know what you really need, or you want to know first, or where you take action on, or you want predictions on, it gets too complex. And I like, if I look at suppliers, I think we are moving into this eco play, where we have this ecosystem. You cannot do it all on your own, depending on what you want to achieve. This was one of the lessons that I learned in Silicon Valley, where a lot of startups are thriving because there is this eco play, right? I'm selling this, I can do there. It's all connected. And if we can make that on a bigger level, where digital can help because of the transparency of the data, of connectivity, because we can talk easily now, although we are in different places, that is a good thing. And maybe an example close to my heart is sustainability. If you talk about supply chain and sustainability and understanding, even from a consumer perspective, which product is costing a lot of CO2, or how did it travel, tomatoes that are traveling from Spain to the Netherlands and back because something is happening or whatever, then I would not buy, right? So this is all about the data transparency, playing together to make it happen. And an example of one of the giants is Walmart, for instance, that is also asking, or that came up with the sustainability index of suppliers. And that makes me smile because it's also, hey, this is another way of collaboration, working together towards a bigger plan or purpose.
Very good examples, and thanks for sharing those couple of points. I see ecosystem, transparency, trust being talked about. Sustainability was another angle, but none of you mentioned about experience of suppliers, right? Walmart says, I'm going to hold you accountable for meeting the sustainability index, but I'm not necessarily talking about your experience with us. So that would be interesting to hear or see what Walmart has to say. But this can be a very lively discussion that we probably have to put for another occasion where we talk about the supplier experience. We are getting close to the half-hour mark, which is the end. But before we go, two things. One is, what do you think is the future got for us in the next 3 to 5 years? And any other final thoughts before we wrap up the session?
That is a very difficult question for 2 minutes to go.
No, we have some flexibility. So take.
And I think maybe it's more wishful thinking than that we really know what the future is. But for me, we have addressed the challenges, the different thinking in the companies, that they would embrace data, technology, and not only to make more money, but for the better. Right, for good purposes, diversity, accessibility, sustainability, because it's also, if you look at the new generations, if you talk about the future, they are also demanding this. They're getting more and more satisfied or happy with companies that have a purpose. So using technology and data for solving big problems, that would be, for me, the future that's coming, that we can all work on together.
Very good. Carlos?
Yeah, well, I am optimistic about the future, but being optimistic doesn't stop me being realistic. So I think one of the elements, I mean, no question, no debate about digital. The digital word is the word of the present already, not even the future. The future, I don't even know what is coming. But I think one point of concern, if I would that I would raise, probably a topic for another of those discussions, is how are we preparing the generations that are coming for that future? So upskilling, education. If I have kids at school, one already going to the university. If I look what they are studying, what is part of the standard education content, they are learning for the jobs of the past. They are not learning yet for the jobs of the future. Mm-hmm. So if organizations don't enter in this game, both by pressing, but also by supporting and pushing, we might have difficulties in really opening completely the value that technology can bring us, just because the new generations are not being properly educated for that.
Thank you. Again, a good reference to the new generation as well, which actually helps both Georgina and I, because we belong to the new generation.
Yes,
we are still in their 20s. So, Georgina, your turn.
So I sort of follow Carlos's sentiment a little bit, because to me, I think in the next 10 years, I think the developments in digital will be extraordinary. They're moving at an incredible pace, but I don't think people and operations have kept up with it. So if I look at the developments in the last 10 years, I have a job because people are still stuck with doing stuff like they did back in the 90s, and they aren't keeping up with it, and they aren't being given the time and the space to develop. So I think the big companies that have the investment platforms to be able to develop will go streets ahead. I think the startup companies will go streets ahead, but I think the bulk mass market will be not hugely developed. They will be somewhat developed, but I do feel that the potential won't be reached. I think the technology will far exceed the capability of what's on the ground.
That's the point that I need to contest, and I just got, which is why I was looking at the producer here. They told me that I could get another 5 to 10 minutes on this one. So thanks for that. But to your point, Georgina, the big companies, small companies, and the mid-sized companies, I think I see the danger more is for the big companies. And we already start seeing some of the patterns there. The reason for that is over the last 100 years, the big companies have managed to run themselves in a certain way without necessarily being challenged. Their market domination or the way they have operated have not been challenged. Let me give you an example, right? So if I have to introduce a new technology in a mid-sized company, let's say it's a $500 million company versus a company that's $10 billion, right? In order for me to introduce it into a $10 billion company is going to be 10 times tougher because of all the protocols and then the suppliers, onboarding and this and that. It takes forever. By the time a supplier gets approved, many cases, the technology has moved on. Compared to the middle one, where they have the agility to be able to take on the digital much faster than some of the larger companies. So again, it's a debate that we are having. Small companies have higher chances of succeeding. At the same time, the flip side is they also have higher chances of failing. So that is that. But it is going to be an interesting time, and I will just give one round if there are any other final thoughts before we wrap up, and then I'll talk about something which is related to this topic, and then we will wrap it up.
Yeah, maybe adding to the startups and the smaller companies maybe they're an advantage. On the other hand, the big companies that we see that are successful have maybe as well the budgets and the money to invest, right? So it all depends back to what the leadership thinks, the real commitment to digital. Another great example for next time is Starbucks, how they really committed to the data, connected devices, supply chain, sustainability, all together, and digital first, I would say, not cloud first, digital first. So it is possible, but it needs a real belief, commitment, and all these elements that we discussed.
Right. Anybody else?
I think it's a lot about reinventing yourself, right? So how organizations in general can manage the process of staying in the market, but at the same time reinventing themselves, which means that they always need to have certain constant stream, because that's what is going to maintain them from a financial perspective. And then on top, they need to come with the innovation and the renovation as well, which is valid, I think, for all industries, all companies. I mean, I see some people still listen to Madonna, but very few listen to Supertramp. People still listen Paul McCartney, but not much George Harrison, right? So the ones who were able to reinvent themselves keep, hitting the public.
Absolutely. Thanks, Carlos. That's really, really nice way of putting it there. So the reality is there were dinosaurs. There are dinosaurs amongst us as well in terms of companies that are going to perish. We already see some of the signs of that happening. So until unless companies reinvent themselves, I mean, Netflix is a prime example, the way they have reinvented themselves several times over, and now they're dominating the market like nobody else. But before I leave, there are 6 trends that I wanted to talk about that have just accelerated the need for digital adoption. First of all is Gen X and Gen Ys are going to get into that retirement age. Gen X already, Gen Y, a large number of them are going to get into the retirement stage over the next 10 years, in the coming decade. The second thing is, because of that, it also means millennials and Gen Z are going to enter the workforce. These are the people who are digitally native. They are a lot more used to social media. When they want information, they will go up to Google and all of that. They don't even know what Ask Jeeves was. So that's the difference. Whereas the Gen X or the Gen Ys, we tended to be a lot more loyal to the companies that we work with. The third one is, remember the time. If you really come to think of it, if you really think how or where, what was the trigger point that the digital revolution actually started? That was fourth generation of telecom. That really brought the computer into our pocket with the smartphones coming in. That's really when we started talking about taking photographs, sharing with our friends, putting it on Facebook, real connectivity. We think, hey, it's probably the Google or Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever. The reality is it's the fourth generation of telecom that kind of changed the world or triggered the change in the world. Fifth generation or 5G is knocking at our door. We don't know what it is going to bring to us. So that's our third key point for digital. The fourth one is job reconstruction. And I think some of you already mentioned what we did in the past are not going to be the same kind of jobs in the future, for sure. 70% of the jobs in the next 10 years, as per Dell, are going to change in the content or in this construct. The fifth point is internationalization and globalization plus nationalism. So we saw in the last 30, 40 years more globalization taking place. But over the last 10 years, we've also seen increase in nationalism, whether it was in the US, whether it was Brexit, whether it was the trade barrier between China and West, and it is going to go up. There is going to be more protectionism coming in. There is going to be a demand for more international trade. At the same time, there is going to be more protectionism coming in. So people will be reinventing on how they navigate that. But most importantly, the one thing that completely changed the way we work today, and the world is never going to be the same again, is Corona. And we are faced with the new normal. So that's our 6 trends, which I think have just accelerated the need for digital revolution in our lives. Ladies and gentlemen, including the audience, this was a fantastic discussion, and thanks for being part of it. Let's give you our esteemed panelists, Carlos, Laura, and Georgina, a virtual round of applause. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, for having us. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And with that, we essentially come to the end of the 2-day event here. So for those of you who want to stay connected, follow us on LinkedIn. Our LinkedIn page is called Roundtable Insights. Just one word, Roundtable Insights. Follow us on LinkedIn. We've also got a Facebook page. It's again the name Roundtable Insights. And then we have a Twitter where we post on a regular basis on what are the events, some of the insights, and the hashtag and the handle for that is @Roundtable INS8 Insight, and that's our third handle. And then we've got a magazine called Insightism, which is also available on insightism.io, which you can easily subscribe to and share. We've got great sets of articles being published there, which gets published. So we have several ways to stay connected. We are using digital technology. We are using data in order to stay connected. We are a small company, and we want to make waves in the world, as per our panelists mentioned. So with that, I would like to wish you guys all a very happy week, rest of the week. Stay healthy, stay safe. Until next time, bye-bye.